Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
Okay, so my name is Kaoma Chimbabantu. Can you hear me? Can you see my slide?
Yes, I can.
Okay, can you see it move?
Sure.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so yes, my name is Dr. Chimbabantu, Alexis Kaoma. So I'm a nuclear medicine physician. I am based at the University Teaching Hospitals, the adult one, in at the nuclear medicine department. So some time back we used to be part of radiology, but we are now our own department. So if you do know where radiology is, it is the side, the door that basically faces the library or just on top of the ICU of the UTH. Why am I teaching physiology? Well, I am not a radiologist, and as you know, radiology focuses on anatomy, but we on the nuclear medicine side of things focus on the function of the body, basically the physiology of the body. So today we are basically having a small talk by getting to know each other, and we are going to talk about the introduction to physiology. So, physiology or human physiology is basically a scientific study of chemistry and physics, the structures of the body, and the ways in which they work together to support the function of life. Um, Much of the study of physiology is centered on the body's tendency towards maintaining a constant environment, which is also known as a homeostasis. And as it is defined here, homeostasis is basically the state of steady internal conditions maintained by living things. So the study of physiology is um, um, includes observation, both by using your naked eyes and by using microscopes, but it also involves manipulation of the different body processes, with drugs. And when you do that, you carry out some measurements of what those manipulations are going to be. So current advances in physiology depend on carefully designed laboratory experiments that review the functions of the many structures and chemical compounds that make up the human body. By the way, I am recording this lecture just so that if you want, you can play it back if there's anything that you did not understand. So, if you look at the function of the body, we are going to talk about the organizational structure of the body. And you know very well that the body is made up of cells, and you know that those cells will then make up different tissues, and you know the different tissues are going to make up different organs, and the organs will make up systems, and the systems together will make up an organism. So, you can also look at this organization of the body um, as that of social order. This social order will be made up of 100 trillion of cells that are organized in different functional structures. So, from tissues to organs to systems until finally into an organism. So, each of these organizational structures is important in that it is useful in maintaining this constant environment that we are calling homeostasis. in the extracellular fluid, which is also referred to as internal environment. So why is a constant environment important? It is important because if it is not maintained, so by that we're talking about maintaining an ideal temperature at which body processes will occur. And for those body processes to occur, you know, you need enzymes to be in the right environment. So I'm talking about temperature, I'm talking about pH, I'm talking about osmolarity, that kind of thing. So if there's a disruption, let us say that a certain system is not working right in the body, and because of that particular system not working right in the body, you then have a disturbance to this constant environment or homeostasis. What will result is, because that system is not performing its job, you can look at it. You guys are in service, you are working. Imagine you are a team on a shift. It's a night shift, such as this one. And then you have said, okay, so you are going to man this line of beds and you are going to line that line of beds. And all of a sudden, the colleague manning the first line disappears. It means that you now have to, do double shift, and that will result in fatigue. You, you that is remaining on the ground, you're going to be fatigued. So it's the same thing. If one system in the body that's supposed to maintain pH, is not doing a good job, what will happen then is that the pH, the control of pH will get out of hand, and it may result in illness. And if there's a major dysfunction, if it is not corrected, that situation may even result in death. So the next slide basically just speaks to the organizational structure of the body. As you can see here, I've got atoms. The combination of these atoms are making molecules. The molecules together will form cells. The cells, and we have an example of a muscle cell here, a smooth muscle cell. And you can see that a combination of muscle cells will then make up, the smooth muscle tissue. And we know that this smooth muscle tissue is part, of the stomach. But in the stomach, there are other tissues. For instance, you've got the tissues that form the epithelium. You've got the tissues that form the serosa. You've got blood vessels, etc., etc. And the stomach is part of a bigger organizational structure, which is the gastrointestinal system. And we know that the gastrointestinal system will be made up of the esophagus, the stomach itself, the small intestines, the large intestines, and it also has accessory organs, which we know to be the liver, the pancreas, salivary glands, etc. And we know that this GIT system is part of a bigger organizational structure, you know, which is that of the organism. So you have the GIT system, you've got the respiratory system, you've got the cardiovascular system, you've got the central nervous system. So together, all these systems then form what is known as an organism. But I'm sure you know this already, isn't it? This is nothing new. Can you hear me? Are we together?
Yes, Doc.
Absolutely. Without boring you too much, it's a very summarized talk. We can look at the cell. We are going to look at the cell again, but in brief, since we are discussing the organizational structure of the body. We know that the basic unit of the body is known as the cell, and we've already talked about the fact that so you'll have a certain kind of cells with certain attributes that will come together to form what would be known as a tissue. We already gave an example of a smooth muscle tissue. You could also talk about blood. You may be aware that blood is tissue. and is made up of red blood cells, obviously, with special attributes. What are these special attributes? So, the red blood cell, for instance, is special in that it has no nucleus. And instead of not having a nucleus, it has special compounds in its center that are called heme. And these compounds give it the ability to be able to carry oxygen from the lungs to the different tissues of the body. If you look at the smooth muscle cell that we looked at, it is a cell, but it has special attributes. What are these special attributes? It is made up of myofibrils, that are able to make it shorten. And if it is shortening, um, so if you have a smooth muscle cell shortening and the next other smooth muscle cell is shortening, it then ends up shortening the whole tissue, and the better example is when you look at your biceps, muscle. If all your biceps muscle shorten, then you can easily lift your arm. So basically, you create movement that way. So apart from each of these cells having these special attributes, they do have some things in common. And what are those? So each of these special cell will have the ability, to cause a reaction, between oxygen and carbohydrate, basically, in the glycolysis or the Krebs cycle to generate energy. The ability to metabolize fat, the ability to metabolize protein, basically to release energy. And we also know that all these cells, have the ability to produce end products of these chemical reactions, which will then be secreted into the surrounding. In the next image, what I have is basically a structure of the cell. So this whole thing, what you're looking at, this whole thing is a cell. This bluish coloration is basically what represents the outside of the cell. So the outside of the cell is called, basically, that would be the extracellular fluid. What is inside the cell would be the intracellular fluid. And we know that what separates the extracellular fluid from the intracellular fluid would be your plasma membrane. And we know that, um, does anybody know any special attributes of the plasma membrane? Just so that I'm not talking alone.
Uh, yes, Doc.
Yes, please.
It's selectively permeable.
Yeah, I can hear you, sir. Come again.
I'm saying it's selectively permeable.
Selectively permeable. Yeah, that's one attribute. Yes, and we are going to briefly talk about how that is important. We are going to cover this in a little bit more detail. So today is just basically where touching here, there, touching there, that sort of thing. Do you know the building blocks? Oh, how does it make it selectively permeable? What does it even mean, selectively permeable? So, as the word,
Yeah,
yes, sir, go ahead.
yeah. From my little understanding, selectively permeable means that it doesn't allow any everything to go through it. Meaning that it's selective in terms of the things that it allows in and it allows out.
That is very correct, sir. Do you know some of the things that the plasma membrane allows in and does not allow?
Maybe my colleagues can help with that.
Um, Colleagues can also tell us if they know any other attributes of the plasma membrane or anything they know. Any contribution is welcome. Okay, without wasting a lot of your time. So we also know that the plasma membrane is, has got, a head and it's got a tail. So the head is hydrophilic, and you've got hydrophobic tails. So the hydrophilic head will be pointing towards the extracellular fluid and towards the intracellular fluid inside the cell. And the tails, it's called a lipid bilayer. So, on one end you've got this head and tail pointing in the opposite direction, and on the other hand you've got the same arrangement, also pointing in the opposite direction. If you don't understand it, no need to worry. We are going to look at this in detail a little later. And we know that the inside of the cell is basically called the cytoplasm. And we know that the cytoplasm is made up of the liquid part, which is called the cytosol. And we've got organelles, which are basically the solid components of the cell. And among these organelles, we've got organelles that are covered by membrane, also referred to as membranous organelles. And we have those that are not covered by membranes, known as non-membranous organelles. Examples of organelles that are covered by membrane could be, your lysosomes, basically your nucleus, your endoplasmic reticulum, your mitochondria, etc. Examples of the solid part of your cytoplasm that is not covered by membrane is the cytoskeleton, your microvilli, your centromere, cilia, ribosomes, etc. Okay, so you might want to know also that most of our bodies are basically made up of fluid. We are also going to cover this thing in detail, so forgive me if I seem to be jumping all over. So this fluid, so our bodies are basically 60% fluid, and this is mainly water solution, ions, and other substances. And this fluid is divided into intracellular and extracellular fluid. The intracellular fluid makes up two-thirds of this 60% fluid that we're talking about, while the extracellular fluid makes up one-third of this 60% fluid that we're talking about. It is the extracellular fluid which makes up the internal environment. And the extracellular fluid is basically the fluid that you're going to find not inside the cell, outside the cell. So anything in between the cells, or what you would refer to as the interstitium, that is extracellular fluid. And the fluid part of blood, which is basically the plasma, is also known as the extracellular fluid. Also, fluid that we are going to find in special parts of the body, such as the synovium, the CSF, all these are basically, well, some people do say classify them under extracellular fluid, but some people are referred to them as transcellular fluid. We shall look at this in detail in one of our lectures. Okay, so the extracellular fluid contains ions and nutrients that are necessary to support a cell life and will be transported by blood to every part of the body. This is important in helping us to keep the constant environment for the cell, and keeping the constant environment, like we've already said, will help the cell to continue living, growing, and performing its functions. Okay, did I have somebody raise their arm? Is there a question? We can move on.
Sure, Doc.
Okay, guys. So
Oh,
just
it
so
wasn't a question,
yes.
but some of our colleagues are asking if you can let them in.
Okay, so I'll pause for a little while. Okay, I think we should be okay now. Okay, so can you still see my slide?
Yes, yes, yes. It seems so. Some of us, no, but it seems.
Absolutely. So moving forward, so guys, you might be interested to know. Apparently, in some of the previous exams, what we are talking about. So I think in one of the short notes, after all, I mean, we attend this school so that we can pass exams. So we might as well talk about exam. So one question was asking, can you, well, basically, can you talk about, I think it was talking about describe fluid compartments. So in describing fluid compartments, you must talk about these three categories that I spoke about. Some people say it's two, but some people say three. Okay, so for our sake, we're going to say three. So we're talking about the um, the intracellular compartment. So which is basically the what makes up intracellular compartment is the intracellular fluid, which we said basically is the largest compartment because it makes up two-thirds of the 60% of the body fluid that we spoke about. Then you've got the extracellular, which is basically one third, and you've got the transcellular, so which is basically the fluid, what we said in special places, like the CSF, like the synovial fluid and things like that. Okay, so moving on. So just to give you an overview, so between this intracellular and extracellular fluid, there are some differences. And what are the differences? And I'll tell you why we are talking about it. So basically, in the extracellular fluid, so which is the fluid outside the cell, you are going to find a lot of sodium, chloride, bicarbonate, and other nutrients, such as oxygen, glucose, fatty acid, amino acid, carbon dioxide, and other metabolic waste. In the intercellular fluid, you've got a lot of potassium, you've got magnesium, you've got phosphate ions, instead, of the sodium and chloride ions that are outside. And the body is designed in such a way that at any particular time, there should be a lot of potassium, and magnesium inside the cell. And there should be a lot of, sodium and chloride outside the cell. And you're going to see that this is important, especially in basically in the nerve cells. You're going to see that um, upon receiving a correct stimulus, certain channels in the plasma membrane are going to open. And when they open, because there's a lot of concentration of the sodium outside in the extracellular fluid, so the sodium is going to gush inside the cell along the concentration gradient like that. And by doing so, it allows these cells of the nervous system, to be able to propagate, a nerve impulse. But we shall discuss this when we talk about the CNS in detail a little later. And you can see that because the cells help to maintain these different ions along this concentration gradient that we have described, it helps to keep this environment constant, which is favorable for the survival and for the normal functioning of the cells, basically. Okay, moving on. So we've already talked about it. So this same state of keeping a constant environment, we said that is referred to as homeostasis. And we can give some examples, of the different body organs and systems that help, to keep this constant environment. I mean, you can look at the lungs, for instance. The lungs are very important in this homeostasis to our body. Why is that? The lungs supply the different cells of the body with oxygen, which they need to survive. Because if they don't, they can't produce energy and they will eventually die. Okay? We can talk about kidneys. Kidneys are very important in that the products of metabolism of the different cells of the body, the kidneys are the ones that are going to get rid of that metabolite. If the kidneys don't do that, and we know that the kidneys perform more than just getting rid of metabolites, but let's focus on metabolites for now. If let us say that somebody has got end-stage kidney failure, we know that there's going to be a lot of uremia and other metabolites in one's blood, which may hinder, you know, um, the normal functioning of certain metabolic processes. And eventually, somebody may lose their life as a result. We can look at some other body systems that help to maintain a constant environment. So we can talk about the cardiovascular system or the circulatory system. We know, to put it simple, we need the cardiovascular system because our bodies are big, and it's basically we need a way, of moving, molecules from high concentration, or shall we say point of production to where it is required. An example would be we need a way of moving because not all cells in the body, for instance, if you look at your muscle cell is not able to get oxygen from the environment, you know. So it will rely on the lungs to get the oxygen from the environment, but the lungs and the muscle are far apart. So there has to be some sort of transport system to move that oxygen molecule from the lungs to the muscle cell so that we can maintain constant supply, of this oxygen to the muscle, and by doing so, keeping a constant environment for the muscle to continue performing its normal tasks. Okay. So this is basically a diagram talking about, the circulatory system or the cardiovascular system. What you can see here, this is the right side of the heart. So basically, you've got venous return coming to the right side of the heart. It is being pumped to the lungs, and when it is pumped to the lungs, what is happening is that as it passes through the capillaries of the lungs, it is losing carbon dioxide to the lungs, but it is getting oxygen. And as the oxygen comes, of course, you know that it becomes red, and the blood then will come back to the left side of the heart. And when it does that, it's going to be pumped to the rest of the body. We've given some examples here. So it's being pumped to the GIT. As it passes the GIT, it's obtaining important nutrients which are necessary for the metabolism of the body, helping to keep a constant environment again. It is passing to the kidneys. We know that some of the waste products of metabolism are going to be gotten rid of from here. We give an example: urea, creatinine. So they'll be gotten rid from here. That way, that is also helping us keep a constant environment. But we also know that we gave an example that this blood may be supplied to muscle tissue, and when it reaches muscle tissues, there will be a network of capillaries. And in this network of capillaries, this blood is going to supply, important metabolites that the muscle cell cannot get on its own. An example would be the oxygen and the glucose. But at the same time, as it does that, it will also be taking away waste products of metabolism. In particular, you'll be talking about the CO2 and other waste products of metabolism that it's going to either take back to organs where these metabolites can be gotten rid of. So, for example, carbon dioxide to the lungs, the urea to the kidneys. Absolutely. And by doing so, it keeps a constant environment. We can talk about the respiratory system. We already mentioned what happens. The respiratory system is very important in that it has the ability, the alveoli, which is the air sac. When we breathe in air, the air sac, that's where all the air will go. So the air sac or the alveoli comes in very close proximity with the pulmonary capillaries. Because it comes in close proximity, it is possible for molecules to move from a region of high concentration to low concentration. So when the oxygen is returning rather, when the blood is returning from the muscle, the concentration of oxygen is lower than that in the alveoli. So what will happen then is that the one in the alveolus, singular is alveolus, the oxygen molecule will move from the alveolus into the capillary and so ensuring that our blood becomes oxygenated and ensuring that our body gets adequate oxygen and helping us to keep a constant environment with a supply of oxygen. But at the same time, we already mentioned it, the lungs are very important. At any particular time, as the blood is returning from the tissues, there'll be a higher concentration of carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide is going to diffuse from the blood into the lungs and eventually into the surrounding atmosphere. Also helping us to keep a constant environment. We know that if you get too much carbon dioxide in your body, that may not go well, with keeping a constant environment because your blood is, basically your pH is going to be deranged, and we know that pH is an important factor that helps our enzyme to function optimally. We've already talked about the gastrointestinal system. We know that without the gastrointestinal system, it will be hard for us to get that glucose molecule to the muscle. The muscle can't, if you stand next to a sugar cane, you can't get that sucrose into your muscle cells. You have to chew it, it has to be broken down into simpler molecules, and then it has to be absorbed into your blood. And then, the two systems working together, that's the GIT and the cardiovascular system, will then be able to provide important nutrients that are needed to keep a constant environment for your muscle cell and many other body tissues, to be able to perform their normal functions. We can also talk about the musculoskeletal system. The musculoskeletal system is basically made up of our muscles and our bones, musculoskeletal. So it's a combination of muscles and bones. So these are important. Why are they important? We've been talking about how all the other systems are helping to keep a constant environment with the muscles. They're important because your muscles must function. Because this way, it you as an organism, if let us say you are in a hostile environment, and by that I mean let us say you're in a room that is becoming too hot and you feel the sweating, you know that if you stay here too long, you're going to die. So the muscle will help you to move you as an organism from a hostile environment. But the muscles are also important in that they help you as an organism to hunt. How are you going to find food? You know. We also know that the muscles are important in regulating temperature. We know that, let us say, if it gets cold, your skeletal muscles are going to go into involuntary contractions, and that has a tendency of helping you to generate heat, therefore compensating or rather keeping the body warm, um, correcting, for the cold environment that may not favor the proper functioning of your body. We already talked about kidneys, but as you know, apart from just getting rid of waste product of metabolism, the kidneys are important for regulating your blood volume. They're also important in, maintaining electrolyte balance. For instance, how much sodium you should have, how much phosphate you should have, The kidneys are very important with this perspective. We also know that the kidneys play an important role in maintaining how much protons, hydrogen protons, are in your blood, and indirectly helping you maintain um, an optimum pH at which your body will function optimally. The kidneys, as we will learn next semester, if you guys don't fire me, that is, are also important in that they have got an endocrine component, as you may know. You know that things like the erythropoietin is basically a hormone which encourages production of red blood cells in our red marrow. It's produced in the kidneys. This is the reason why, our patients with chronic renal failure, instant renal failure, may present with anemia, among other things. The kidneys are also important, as you will learn when we look at, the skin, or rather the integumentary system, that play a very key role in the production of vitamin D. Kidneys also play an important role. You may have heard of the renin-angiotensin system. So basically, when you've got reduced perfusion to the kidneys are going to produce a special enzyme, which is going to, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it's going to end up with basically producing compounds that are going to cause vasoconstriction in your arterioles and basically leading to an increase in your BP. We can talk about the immune system as well. We are talking about these systems. Basically, we are basically looking at an overview of how these systems help us to keep a constant environment. So the immune system is important in that it consists of white blood cells, tissue cells that are derived from the white blood cells themselves, the thymus, the lymph nodes, and the lymph vessels. And these are important in that they protect the body from pathogens such as bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi. This system is able to distinguish what is friendly and what is foreign. So it's able to tell that, oh, this kind of combination of proteins does not belong to this body, and therefore it will attack it, and by so helping us to get rid of pathogens that may disrupt the normal functioning of our body, and by doing so, helping us to keep a constant environment, which is what we are saying is homeostasis. Ladies and gentlemen, we can also talk about the integumentary system, so which basically consists of the skin and its various appendages, namely nails, hair, and glands. So we know very well that the skin helps to protect our body from the environment. You can imagine if you didn't have your skin. If you walk in the sun, you would basically lose all the the extracellular and the intracellular fluid. It will evaporate. And when that happens, you'll be dead. We also know that the skin is important. For instance, imagine if you were like an amoeba, you didn't have skin. So if let's say you're working in the ward and that sodium chloride that you give your patients got poured on your skin, it would be very easy then to enter your body. Maybe that's not even a good example. Imagine if you didn't have your skin. How many times have you touched people with hepatitis B? We know how contagious it is. Now imagine without having a skin. It would be very easy transmission then. Absolutely. What are the things that the skin help us? We know that the skin has sweat glands, and the sweat gland is important in helping us get rid of, regulate, iron concentration. It is also important in helping us maintain body temperature. Let's say if it gets hot, you're going to start sweating. So is that so when you sweat, that will help to cool your body, helping you to maintain a temperature that is ideal for the body. And that is an example of homeostasis. The skin has hair. This hair is important. Why is it important? because also it helps us to maintain, um, an ideal temperature. Let us say if it gets cold, your hair are going to stand. How is that going to happen? There are special muscles that attach to this hair, and as the hair stands, it's going to trap air around it, and it acts like as though you're wearing a gown, you know, or a sweater of some kind. As it does that, then it prevents you easily losing heat to the environment, basically. Moving on, we can also talk about the reproductive system. So, in a man and woman, the reproductive system is obviously different. In a man, you've got the penis, you've got the prostate, the ductus deferens, you've got your seminal vesicles, you know, and basically, you know what comes out of that. In a woman, you've got the vagina, you've got the uterus, ovary, fallopian tubes, and you know what that is for, obviously. Now, some people don't really look at, the reproductive system as an organ that helps us to maintain a constant environment. But some people argue that they, the reproductive system helps us, to produce new beings, basically. And that way, it helps us to replace, the old ones that are dying out. It can be debated really how that helps to maintain a constant environment in an organism. Perhaps not at an organism level. I mean, it's food for thought, basically. We can talk about control mechanisms in the body. So, what are the body has certain mechanisms that help, the body either at cellular, organ, system level, to keep this constant environment that we're talking about. And it may not just happen within one system; it can be a combination of systems, in able to achieve this mechanism. So, an example, or rather, before I tell you an example, so there are two types of control mechanisms. So we've got what's referred to as the negative feedback mechanism, and we've got what is referred to as the positive feedback mechanism. An example of negative feedback mechanism would be the mechanism that is employed when all of a sudden, let us say, for some reason or the other, um, maybe you're not breathing enough, and so the concentration of carbon dioxide increases in your body. So when that happens, it would eventually lead to an increase, in the concentration of your carbon dioxide in your extracellular fluid, and they are particular centers that are designed to pick up the fact that there is now an increase in the concentration of carbon dioxide. When this happens, so I think there's some chemoreceptors in the carotid bodies and in the aortic arch, but also in the brain itself. So when this happens, you are going to have signals from these centers feeding into the brain, the respiratory center in particular. And what will happen, the end result will result in having an increased respiratory effort. So you're going to breathe faster. And when you breathe faster, this will allow you to then get rid of the excess carbon dioxide, which started this cascade of reactions in the first place. So you can see negative feedback mechanism will basically um, set up a cascade of reactions that is going to end with the sort of the arresting or diminishing of the stimulus that initially started this cascade of reactions. I hope you understand me on that. So if we have a negative feedback mechanism, we have a positive feedback mechanism. So An example of a positive feedback mechanism I would give you. Imagine if you've been in the emergency ward or triage, you may have seen a lot of these patients that are coming from road traffic accidents. If somebody loses, let us say, 500 mils of blood, it's not a big issue. You give them blood expanders, your sodium chloride, you know, actually before, because we are talking about the body maintaining a constant environment on itself. So before you even give them, so up to 1 liter of losing blood, the body is able to, able to maintain perfusion to all the tissues, and the individual will be alive. However, in a normal person, that's an ideal 70 kg man, if you lose about 2 liters of your 5 liter, what's going to happen is that you know you are going to result, basically your blood pressure is going to fall, and as your blood pressure falls, there will be reduced blood pressure, or perfusion that is reaching your coronary vessels. And if you've got reduced perfusion to your heart, what's going to happen is that there will be reduced contractility in your heart. So meaning that, instead of your heart trying to correct, because one of the mechanisms, of your body trying to recover from a reduction in pressure as a result of bleeding, there are many others, but one of them is that the body will increase your heart rate. And, so it will contract faster, and it will contract more. But if there's reduced perfusion to the myocardium, which is the muscle of the heart, if you are not providing it enough blood, because there's not enough blood pressure to be able to reach these muscle cells, meaning your heart will become weaker and weaker. So you can see that in this particular situation, the stimulus, which is the loss of 2 liters of blood, instead of resulting in a cascade of reactions that will result in us, okay, so there's loss of blood and there's drop in pressure. So instead of resulting in reactions that will lead to correcting for this loss in blood pressure, what happens is that you end up losing more and more pressure. You understand? So the initial stimulus is not corrected. It becomes a vicious cycle, as it is called, until death results, basically. I have a graph to try and summarize this story of positive feedback and negative feedback. So what we are talking about here is basically somebody losing blood over time. So on the x-axis, I've got time. On the y-axis, I've got how much blood is being lost. So what we are saying is that, okay, so the blood is normal. This person starts to lose blood, and they lose about 1 liter. At 1 liter, um, the body, tries to compensate for that. How does it do that? It increases the heart rate. The heart starts to beat faster. Your arterioles are basically narrow in diameter, and your kidneys stop losing. Basically, you reduce your urinary output, so keeping as much as you can, inside your body. So over time, you result, there's the blood pressure was falling, or rather the blood was falling. It should be blood pressure. What am I talking about? Blood pressure is falling, but with these measures put into place, your blood pressure returns to normal. But if you lose too much, in this case, you lose 2 liters, the the body is not, because the blood loss is too much. Your heart in this particular case, like we already said, cannot, be able to keep up with that increase in heart rate, increase in contractility. Instead, it's going to become weaker and weaker because it's being perfused less and less because of the drop in blood pressure. So you can see that the blood pressure drops thrice, but eventually the blood pressure drops until it's no longer compatible with life, and you have the organism dying. So in blue here, we've got the negative, a feedback mechanism, and in red here, we've got the positive feedback mechanism. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, that ends our talk today. Do you have any questions? Are we together?
Yes, we are.
Do you have any questions, sir?
It was clear for me. It was clear. I don't have any question. Thank you.
Any other?
It's clear on my part too. Thank you, Doc.
Okay, if everything is okay, that's great. Um, I'm sure you know. Unfortunately, I am terrible with tests, and it's good for us to do tests because um, that's the only time we know how well we are doing on your side and on my side. So I want to give you a test. I guess we can give a test on this very simple thing. Maybe we can have a test maybe Saturday. What do you think? Okay, and how
It's
I do
fine
the
for me.
test? So
It's
it's
fine.
the test is online, and I use so it's MCQ. I like 30 MCQ
Okay.
per test, and so it's going to be on Google Form. Have you used
Okay.
Google Form before? Perfect,
I have.
perfect,
Yes.
perfect. So yeah,
For
so
me, I
it's
have.
it's, it's as easy as that, and there's nothing like no, your paper hasn't been marked for weeks. No, you get the results right there. 5 minutes after the test, you get your mark, and you know who's highest and who's doing well and who's not. Okay. And also, you may have noticed that I have some lectures recorded just like this one. So you can go through those lectures. But if you want us to have your own class, that is also welcome. All right. I appreciate. Is there anybody with a
Okay. So,
question?
I was trying to find out, Doc, when do we get the notes for this lecture that we
Oh,
just had?
I'll send them to the class rep. That
Okay,
is
thank
fine.
you.
So how many people did we have attending today? Only 9. Are we only 9?
No, we are not, sir. It's just that it was difficult for some of us to join. You were not letting us
Oh, so
in.
you're only joining now.
No, I joined a bit earlier, but I found that you had
Okay, but
started
the
already.
good news is that this is it's recorded. So I'll send it to the class rep and
Okay.
you can play it. So not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you so
much.
much, Doc.
Enjoy your evening. Okay, bye.
Thanks. Same.
Thank you.
Enjoy yours too. Good night. Thank you.